Hare Krishna, everyone. This is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology. Today I'm taking another Q&A. I've been getting so many of these lately, so thank you. Feel free to keep them coming. I'm glad that people are engaging. This one comes from my YouTube channel. Achyuta, in your daily practice of loving God and serving others, do you also feel the love of God for you? Because I've practiced loving God and serving others, but I have not felt the reality of God's love for me. Can you comment, please? Thank you for this deeply honest series. Now, this was in response to a series that I did on my main astrology channel on ayahuasca and astrology. In the third video of that series, I had basically said that the most important thing that the ayahuasca journeys had taught me, the kind of I've got the message, so I'm hanging up the phone conclusion of my 10 years with ayahuasca was that God is real, God is love, God lives in my heart, and that my life should be spent loving and serving God. And so this question, which I'll read again just to clarify it, came in response to that kind of conclusion of this series that I had done. Achyuta, in your daily practice of loving God and serving others, do you also feel the love of God for you? The answer to that for me is yes, I do. Not always. Sometimes I feel rather distant and disconnected from God, but yeah, I do feel it, and it comes in interesting ways. It's hard to describe exactly how the love of God appears. It's deeply personal, and I think it can come through many different avenues, or come along through different channels, through other people, through friendships and relationships, through the inner space of my mantra meditation, through my teachers, through other bhakti yogis, through the shastras, through my children, so God can speak to us and show his love for us in a lot of different ways. So, but yeah, I do feel it. And sometimes I don't. Sometimes it feels like God is very absent or far away. So I can sympathize, or just I can identify somewhat with with what you're saying, and I think a lot of people can. The second part of your question says, because I've practiced loving God and serving others, but I have not felt the reality of God's love for me. Can you comment, please? Sure. Well, I think, first of all, it's normal and totally natural to feel distant from God sometimes, and to not feel that, that presence. So, first of all, I think just to normalize that, and not to feel like there's something you should be feeling that you're not feeling. I think we get into our heads about it, and then that can kind of harm us. So there's a prayer in the Bhakti tradition that was first spoken by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is the sort of the incarnation of Krishna in the Kali Yuga, who comes and teaches bhakti. I'm going to read that prayer here for a second. Okay, here it is. I won't read the Sanskrit, just to keep it simple. I'll just read the prayer in English. Glory to Sri Krishna glory to Sri Krishna Sankirtana, which clears the heart of all the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire of conditional life, of repeated birth and death. The Sankirtan movement is the prime benediction for humanity at large, because it spreads the rays of the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss, and it enables us to fully taste the nectar for which we are always anxious. So he's talking here about the chanting of God's names, especially in congregational chanting. Oh my Lord, your holy name alone can render all benediction to living beings, and thus you have hundreds and millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names, you have invested all your transcendental energies. They're not even hard and fast rules for chanting these names. Oh, my Lord, out of kindness, you enable us to easily approach you by your holy names, but I'm so unfortunate that I have no attraction for them. One thing that we say in Bhakti is that it's truly hard to grow close to God unless our daily practice of loving God includes an active form of worship. And mantra meditation is a huge part, in my opinion, of developing that loving connection to God, because in mantra meditation are the seeds of transcendental bliss, and the mantras are medicine, and the mantra or the recitation of God's names in mantra form are part of the cleansing and the removal of obstacles and blocks in the heart that start to help us both to show love, to give love, and to feel love. For most of us in this world, what to speak of connecting with God, it's difficult to actually feel love and to give love. So, what to speak of trying to connect with God through love. It requires practice every day. And in my opinion, it's not just any kind of practice. I try to be quite, ecumenical in the way that I teach bhakti, and saying that, look, if you approach God in your heart in any way, just loving God and kind of, um, involving yourself in contemplation and sort of worship of God on some level every day, that should do the trick, right? That's what we're aiming for. That's what slowly awakens us. And yet in yoga, it's very clear that mantra is one of the main things that we need in order to do that. So I would recommend that also, if people are, it's like I have faith that God is there, but I have faith that I should try to love and serve God in creation, love and serve others. But I don't know how to awaken that natural feeling of love, and I'm not sure that I know how to feel it coming back from God. Well, for this, in the Bhakti tradition and in many yoga traditions, mantra is the medicine. So one may just think, I should take up a mantra to take it to the next level. That's my opinion. Anyway, he goes on, one should chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than the straw in the street. One should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and one should be ready to offer all respect to others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy names of the Lord constantly. So we also have to be really humble. One of the things that I've noticed in terms of, I guess, just when God gets quiet, or when I can't seem to feel God or feel God's presence or feel God's love in reciprocation for me, is that it's often when I'm in a state of getting tangled up in my own mind and getting tangled up in my own desires. And if I treat God like a wish fulfiller rather than trying to direct my love toward God, that it's as though God goes silent. You think about, I use the parenting analogy a lot, but you think about if you have kids, and if your kids are only relating to you from the standpoint of give me something, provide me with something, I'm mad that you haven't given me something, or whatever, there's a way in which the personal, you're not being seen as a person, and so you inwardly you get like, you may ignore your kids sometimes, because you just see like they're just sitting around asking me for things. I use that analogy a lot for myself, to understand that if I'm caught up in my head and I'm not, trying to think of how to love and actually serve God every day, that it's no surprise that I'm not hearing a lot in response. So that's something to just check in on, check in with. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women or any number of followers. I only want your causeless devotion, birth after birth. So the other thing is that, one of the things that can kind of trip us up is just the desires for things that we have. It's like when we're really restless and we want stuff, it has a way of interrupting, creating static in the channel. And it's harder to feel God's love coming back to us and through us. O son of Maharaj Nanda, Krishna, I am your eternal servitor, yet somehow or other I've fallen into the ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at your lotus feet. O my Lord, when will my eyes be decorated with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? When will my voice choke up, and when will the hairs of my body stand on end at the recitation of your names? O Govinda, feeling your separation, I'm considering a moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I'm feeling all vacant in the world in your absence. So here's interesting, right? Here's an incarnation of God praying to God. And what's unique in the Bhakti tradition is that Chaitanya comes in order to relish what it feels like to love God. Because even although God is self-satisfied, in Bhakti we say that God is in an eternal, intimate, loving relationship with those who are devoted to Him. And in that sense, what's so unique about Chaitanya as a figure is that it's Krishna or God incarnate as one of His own devotees in order to feel and experience what it's like to love God. And part of the experience is what it's like to love God when God feels distant or far away or separate. Excuse me. And so here we have in this prayer God expressing the deep feelings of disappointment and feeling that the world is void and depressive because he can't feel God's presence near. Right? So this is being validated even by God. That distance and separation and the feeling of voidness and depressiveness, melancholy, this is part of what it means to be in a relationship with divinity. You can feel that way about your own soul. Where is my soul? Where is my soul gone? And then when it's there, you feel that deep sense of interior selfhood that's there with you. That feels like your perfect home. And when that soulful part of yourself shows up, it's like, oh, where have you been? You're back. Thank you. The same thing is true for God, that in our relationship with God, that we can feel those moments of separation, and that really feeling that moment of separation, or that sometimes it feels it's longer, it's years. Even Mother Teresa, toward the end of her life, in her diaries and journals, which I had a chance to read some of in Calcutta when I went to her convent, and saw her grave. In her diary, she said, "Where are you, God? I can't hear you." So it's very normal, and yet there is a way in which the only thing that we have to realize is that in feeling the pain of that separation, those emotions are authentic, and they are an authentic sign of our love growing. That the pain we feel in separation from God is a sign that our love is there, that God is there, that the pain of separation from God is real, and that means God is real, and so are we. And so if we can remember that, and not despair, but be tolerant and patient and wait, So he says, I know no one but Krishna is my Lord. He shall remain so even if he handles me roughly by his embrace or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me. He's completely free to do anything and everything, for he is always my worshipful Lord, unconditionally. It's like a lover waiting at the window for the beloved to pull in the driveway. The mood of the bhakta is one that says, I know you'll come eventually, because I know your promise is that, I know your promise is good, and I know that your promise is love, and I know that we have a relationship because I've seen and I've felt you before. Our faith that God is even there, that we should invest time and energy loving and serving God, is testament to the fact that we've felt something of God already. That grace has descended into our hearts, and that we've felt the connection to our source. So then we just have to tend with tolerance, patience, humility to the need that we feel for God, and go on loving God and caring more about loving God than of what we're getting in return. That's the mood of the bhakta. It's like, look, you could do whatever you want. You could reciprocate or not. You could smash my heart into a million pieces. But still, I love you. You're the only one I love. Right? Like that. That's that kind of mood. Hopeless romantic mood in bhakti. But that is not to say that God doesn't reciprocate, because God always does reciprocate. And this is one of the more promising elements of bhakti, is that we read the Shastras, for example, in the Srimad Bhagavatam. There's a story, right, where Krishna is with his beloveds in Vrindavan, which is like this heavenly cowherding community in the countryside. And he's called into the city, and he has to go and leave everyone and go into the city to attend all these different things, all these different dramas. And you know everyone's just devastated that he's leaving, and they feel like their life is over, and they can't believe that God would leave and be silent or absent. But he promises, I'll return. So this idea, anyway, is that it's very normal to love God and to serve God and to have periods of time where we don't feel God there. Now, someone might ask another question, or take your question maybe even a step further, which is there something I can do or should be doing to feel God's love more? And of course, the answers to this are very, very personal, because it's really something that if someone's having a problem with, talking to other people, being around other people who are in community of loving and serving God in bhakti yoga is really, really important, because you can't just do it on your own. But a couple of things that I would say about feeling reciprocation more. One is that, again, I think the number one thing that one has to do to develop the feeling of reciprocation is, for me, it's mantra meditation. Because in calling out to God actively with the emotions in the heart through the names of God in mantra and recitation for long periods of time, one starts to feel and hear, and you're kind of illuminated from within, and you start to hear the voice, for example, of the Paramatma, the aspect of God that lives in our heart, like almost like the voice of our conscience. And that voice offers guidance and correction and loving encouragement. And it comes in through our own mind, but we realize where that's coming from. We realize that that's coming from God. And it comes in through us, but it comes from God within us. And I think that mantra meditation, or any kind of daily concentrated time in prayer, is where we start to hear that. The second thing is that the kind of prayer that we're praying is very important. The more that we pray in petition, meaning the more that we ask for something for ourselves, the harder it is to develop a relationship, because we're objectifying God. And God's a person. God's a being. And it's really hard for us to wrap our heads around that. It's much easier for us to think of God as impersonal, as just a white light, or a in undifferentiated energy, or something like that. But we have all the evidence in the world, with a universe filled with individual sentient conscious beings, that that our source, our divine source, is the source of all things, both personal and impersonal, which means that God has a personal form as well. And this is how the Shastras describe it, that there is a sense in which there's an all-pervasive energy of God, but that this all-pervasive energy of God is coming from a being, an actual being. So if we treat that being like that being is nothing more than an order supplier, a wish fulfiller, it's much harder to feel the personal love of God in return. The final thing that I would say is that, our mind, there was an interesting study done, and I can't remember where I read it. It was probably 10 years ago that I read it. And it said that in our mind, our brain, when we are experiencing uh, gratitude, and I think the other one was affection, that when we are experiencing or expressing gratitude, or we are giving affection, that our brain can't tell the difference between whether we're giving it or receiving it. It's like a flower in your brain. And when you start to show positive emotion, deep, sincere, authentic, affectionate emotion or gratitude or things like that, it's like a flower that's pulsating, just starts pulsating. And it's the same kind of pulsation if you're getting it in from other people or from the environment as it is when you're giving it. So in a sense, there's no difference between giving or receiving when these qualities of love, affection, tenderness, gratitude, compassion come in or go out. So it's also important to recognize that one of the ways in which God reciprocates, maybe this is the best answer to your question that I should have started with, is that when we show authentic loving emotions, even the tiniest little amount of loving, affectionate emotion, there's a way in which God in our heart starts to help the whole of us resonate with the same quality that we've given. It's mirrored back to us. So that's why the saying goes, in giving we receive, in loving we are loved, in showing gratitude others are grateful for us. So we get what we give. And that's not to say that you can't give and experience God's silence or distance, but it is to say that we can always check in with ourselves and check to see, am I deeply giving love and affection toward God? Because if I am, you can feel it. And giving affection feels good. Giving love feels good. That's God, right? That's God in us speaking through. That's the way in which we are yoked to God. That we feel that as we give it to God, that we feel it as we give it, that it gives us joy as we give joy and pleasure to God. That's God. And then there's also a way in which spontaneously we can feel things coming from God without doing anything ourselves. And that comes as well. But in my experience, the spontaneous pouring of affection and love from God that comes into our minds and our hearts and our bodies and our lives in different ways, it's really hard to be able to notice it and really deeply feel it unless we aren't in a practice of daily feeling authentic affection for God, really feeling it. Because when you feel it, it feels good. Now, we can't all get there right away, which is why we have sadhana. It's why in bhakti it takes practice loving God. Like you have to actually practice your mantra meditation every day, sing with other people, study the stories of God and the teachings of God through the bhakti yoga tradition anyway. So you need a sangha, you need community to do this, and you need our lives have to be accommodating of the practice of loving God. All right, well, that's what I've got for you. I hope that this was really helpful. And if you have any more questions, feel free to email me at info@nightlightastrology.com. Hare Krishna, everyone. Bye.